gentlemen, the next session is sponsored by ITC Holdings Corporation. Please welcome U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell, U.S. Representative Brenda Lawrence, U.S. Representative Dave Trott, and moderating the discussion is the host of WJR 760 AM, Paul W. Smith.
Okay.
2015 pillars for this great event winding down, although there are a couple of more very important sessions. Talent, urban revitalization, and cohesion, inspiring a commitment among Michigan's leaders to speak with one Michigan voice. This is something we talked about with the newest members of Congress who are seated with us. And Debbie Dingell, you brought that up first. You said we're going to have meetings, we're going to be on the same page, we're going to speak with one Michigan voice. Tell us about that.
Well, I think the 5 freshmen, I mean, we're not always going to speak with one Michigan voice, but we all love Michigan. And I think that American people and Michiganians, Michiganders, whatever we call ourselves, are tired of the partisan fighting, that they want us to come up with answers, solutions. Compromise is not a bad word. I've known Brenda a long time, but David and I have served on boards, et cetera, and we talked when we were both candidates. Let's work together. Let's learn together. Let's learn issues. And we sent a very strong message that that's what we were going to do as 5 freshmen, going to the auto show together, meeting with Dan Gilbert to learn about Detroit. We've continued to work together. We're going over to John Molinari's district, touring farms, and we're all learning together and finding that common ground because we think that's the right thing to do and it's what Michigan people want us to do.
I've been really encouraged as a freshman class, with us, 5 of us being from Michigan, we have really bonded. The thing that was so impressive when we have these monthly meetings, the entire delegation, is that we're focusing on what we can agree upon. We can agree that we need to protect our waters, our fresh waters. And that's something that we will work together. We agree that we need to ensure that our veterans, and in Michigan we're a little challenged with the level of support and funds that are being distributed to our veterans, that's something we collectively say, make a focus of ours or a priority to increase the funding to our veterans. And also infrastructure, we all know that Michigan, as we just heard this last discussion, that should be a priority, the Highway Trust Fund, that we need to get behind that, not to just kick the can down the road, but to make things happen. So we are continuously finding those things that we can agree upon and work together across the aisle, and that's the key. What can we move forward to take care of Michigan? We're going to have disagreements, but there's some powerful issues that we can all come together and address, and I'm very encouraged by that.
Dave?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think we're meeting often, we're communicating, we are trying to find areas where we can work together. We all signed the currency letter as it relates to TPA, which is important. And I think, fundamental, there's a trust that if we disagree on something, we'll talk about it, and none of us will be throwing bombs at each other, which I think is what irritates, people more than anything, is it's just not productive, and we haven't done that, and I can't imagine that we will.
Well, it wasn't that long ago that you were a layperson like the rest of us, and we are tired of you guys not working together, or those guys that were there. We now do have a lot of hope that you new guys, and you're not really new, Congresswoman Dingell, but on the Hill there, you're new as a congressperson, I understand, but you've been there a long time. We need you to work together, and you guys know that better because a year ago you were out there complaining about Congress not getting things done.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 30 years in business, and in business you sit down and you figure a solution out. You don't not talk or not try and find a common ground. So it's for me, it's been refreshing, and I look forward to our meetings.
As a businessman, as a mayor.
As a mayor, I campaigned on, the roads and investing in our infrastructure. A pothole doesn't have an RD on it, it needs to be fixed. And as a mayor, you work with across the aisle with business, with the community. You know that to get things done, you must work together. And so get past your beliefs, let's focus on the issue and work together. And it's different in Washington. But I'm so encouraged by this freshman class. And it's not only just the 5 of us. I am really encouraged by the members that I saw coming in. And we have collectively made sure that we literally cross the aisle on the floor and continuously stay in touch and talk.
And Congresswoman Dingell, you've always been one that would easily cross the aisle if need be, or if it was called for.
I think it's very important. I am new, but I've been mentored by a giant, I will say that, and I'm lucky, and he's always worked across the aisle. He's been brought to task for it, and he's never been sorry 1 minute that he did. We're not problems in this country, aren't Republican or Democratic problems. They're American problems. They're Michigan's problems, and we've got to solve them. And a lot of times, David and I, our districts are close, we learn about issues together. And so when you're getting information, you can trade off on ideas and strategize. And, you know, so anyway, we think it's important. We think we're all working it. We're doing it together. It's important.
Congresswoman Lawrence, you mentioned in your opening comments the Transportation Highway Trust Fund, a big, important topic. But you said we don't want to just keep kicking that can down the road. But aren't we kicking that can down the road right now?
It's very frustrating. And this time, when we were in caucus, that we would support this extension short term based on the commitment that we will sit down and develop a long-term strategy and plan and investment in our infrastructure. We are so challenged in America, and those of us who travel abroad, I had the opportunity to go to Saudi Arabia, and the investment that Saudi Arabia is putting in their infrastructure. Now we know it's not just roads and bridges, it's our ports, it's our rail system. And we in America, as we have all this innovation, these amazing R&D that's going on, we must invest into our infrastructure. I just signed a bill talking about working together. Candace Miller, who has been amazing and a mentor to me, Candace Miller and I signed, co-sponsored a bill to introduce the technology where the road will talk to the car. Now, we're going to have this amazing technology on these lumpy, broken roads. Come on, let's
So some of the language the cars might be using might not be suitable for an audience like this.
The cars might say something really bad.
Cars too, well, that's unspeakable, yeah.
But let's.
But you did talk about, Congressman Trott, back on point, you have talked about the fact that we are just kicking this problem down the road.
Yeah, I mean, let's be realistic on what's happening. So we've extended the Highway Trust Fund until July 31st. That date is not just any random date. On July 30th, we break for 5 weeks. So there's no long-term solution that's going to come to pass in the next 2 months. And
So they passed the extension to go 1 day after you leave.
Well, we've done this repeatedly. We did it with Homeland
It's a
Security.
pattern.
You know,
This is not a good pattern.
Yeah, we saw it with Homeland Security. We've seen it with SGR for 17 years.
But they solved FDR.
After 17 years. But we're gonna see another short-term fix beyond July 31st, and it's no way to run a rodeo. So
I don't believe, we all agree, and let's all put pressure on both of our leaderships
Absolutely.
to try to solve that. I would want to say that. I would also say that there was a letter, I'm not on it, maybe a staff person or two heard about the fact that I didn't see it till afterwards, but I'm told, over 300 signatures, Republican and Democratic, and my heart is on it, that we need a 6-year solution, that we have to stop. You know, I'm not going to not vote to extend the Highway Transportation Fund, because we can't do that to the states. We cannot be that irresponsible that they're not going to know that the money's coming in that they need to fix the roads. But you have a bipartisan group in the House all saying, this has got to get solved. And it's complicated. You know, one of the things that people don't realize, there's less money going into the Highway Trust Fund because autos have become so fuel efficient. That's great. That's a win out of Michigan. But that means people are using less gasoline and less money's going in. So we got to think about how we do this differently.
Well, Debbie, I also want to say in the bipartisanship, I reactivated the Mayor's Caucus. So we have a number of members of Congress who were previously mayors. And as mayors, one of our major focus is infrastructure. And that is something we're bringing them together. And we'll have briefings on this Highway Trust Fund and use that body as previous mayors and in a bipartisan way to push that we must have a long-term fix for this. And it's not acceptable for us in America. And wake up. And we've got to do the work. We have to do the work.
Secretary LaHood said that Highway Trust Fund is broke. We have the fact that this thing that started in 1956, I believe, was to fix highways. And somewhere along the way, as the Wall Street Journal just pointed out in the last week or so, we're taxing for highways, but we're paying for bike lanes. And with all due respect to bikers and people who like to ride their bikes, we have to understand that most of us, we the people, are going to be willing to pay a little extra if we know that the money actually goes just to fix and maintain the roads. That goes federally, that goes in our state situation and with the arguments in Lansing right now.
Absolutely.
We all agree.
Well, then let's just all go home.
But you know what I'm going to say? Rather than sit up here, you all need to tell your state legislators to get some balls. You got to tell them that they've got to, I'm sorry, they didn't know what they were doing. The voters, when's the last time you saw a referendum go down by 80%? They didn't know what they were voting on. We've got the same responsibility. I get emotional on this. That we've got the same responsibility. If we do not want to be a third world country, we've got to fix our roads and infrastructure. So we've got to figure out how we're going to do it. We've got to work with the American voter, and we've got to do it. That's what you elect us to do, solve problems. It's one we've got to solve.
And Paul W., another issue.
I get emotional when she uses the word balls. And I'm concerned that I have to be up here for 19 more minutes rather than getting out and getting the T-shirts printed as a quote from Congresswoman Dingell, America, get some balls. Another missed business opportunity, yes?
There's another issue, too. When we talk about the Highway Trust Fund, we must increase it. If we approve it, we're just patching the existing infrastructure we have. And this is the hard conversation, that fund must be increased because we need to reconstruct roads. If we just approve this and say we're going to extend it for 6 years, our infrastructure will just decay in front of us. So this is a bigger issue than just allocating the existing budget.
I know that you feel very strongly, all three of you, about the Trade Priorities Act. This is an act that expired in 2007. It's 2015. Tell me what this is all about and why all of a sudden it's very important to you.
Well, I think, I'm a free trade guy, so, TPA moves the ball forward in that regard, and I'm generally supportive, but we have a unique problem here in Michigan because the TPA and potentially the TPP has no currency protection to it, and the recourse doesn't seem to have enough teeth in it, so there's real concern, particularly on the part of the automotive companies, that as we move forward on the vote, and there'll probably be a vote next week on TPA, that it's given the president authority, but it's really not taking care of our region, and so it's important for us to be able to write the rules and not have China do it. So I understand the significance of it, and I think that other countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and the Philippines are looking to the United States for leadership and for more economic opportunity because they're afraid of China. So I think in the big picture, it's an important step forward, but. For us in Michigan, it's a particular problem because of the currency issue, and the currency issue is significant. It's $5,000 to $10,000 a car, so it's not something that can be overlooked. And I had a conversation with Secretary Liu, and they seem largely ambivalent about the currency issue and the administration.
Why are you laughing? Wait a second. There's a reaction here.
Because Secretary Liu looks at me and is like, "Could you leave the room and not talk to anybody for months?" Because, but David's absolutely right. The fact of the matter is currency manipulation matters. We've done this. I've seen this movie before. Look at NAFTA. We've lost 1 million jobs because of NAFTA. Let's take the Korea Free Trade Agreement that everybody, Ford Motor Company had their arm broken on, GM had their arm broken on. Let's talk about what happened after that. Okay, we have 20,000 more imports into Korea and 460,000 more Korean imports into the United States. Let's talk about currency manipulation. Let's talk about the fact that right now the yen is 120 to $1. That comes out to $8,000 to $10,000 per car for the Japanese. That's being used to undercut the cost of parts, do advertising, and undercut the overall cost. Toyota last year made more money in currency manipulation in this market than Ford Motor Company did in its worldwide production. I know, and so do these guys, the American auto worker. We need to compete and can compete in any world marketplace. We build the best product there is, but we cannot compete against the Bank of Japan or the Japanese government, which has a total of 6% penetration, 6% of European, Asian, and domestic cars. They have trade barriers. We need a level playing field, and we need a United States government that's going to stand up for the American worker.
That would be an applause line if I ever heard one. Come on, we're doing what we're doing here. You have to follow along.
How do you
Now,
really
Congressman
feel?
Trott, where were you?
Yeah,
Well, W, I also want to say, as we talk about the currency manipulation, as I'm constantly approached about where I stand with this, any of us who have lived through the NAFTA agreement understand that this is about jobs, this is about our economies. We literally saw factories and unemployment grow in our country and in this state as they grew in other countries, Mexico and other places. And it was a direct result of those trade agreements. Are we really committed to, in Michigan, and this delegation has proven that we're standing strong together, that we are committed to protecting our own industry in our country and our jobs. And I told one reporter, this is a clear example of putting the mask on yourself first before you help others. Trade deals should be one that benefits all the industries. And this is not the case. This is not what we're being presented with. And that's why we must stand strong and get the currency manipulation issue addressed. And I'm all about protecting our jobs and protecting protecting America's economy.
but it's worth noting, you know, that trade probably is responsible for up to a million jobs in Michigan. So, so you know, trade is a good thing for the Michigan economy. It's a good thing for Michigan jobs. But the president's unwillingness really to have currency, and his concern is, you know, that we can't be dictating monetary policy to other countries, and that's really not what we're after. What we're after is blatant, egregious violations of currency manipulation and having the agreements address that. And I don't know that it's going to happen because I'm concerned that the president is not open to that conversation. And there are some, you know, it's interesting because there are some Republicans who are going to vote against TPA for the single reason that they don't want to give the president the authority. I don't agree with that analysis, and I think TPA actually gives Congress a more meaningful role than we currently have. So I think it's a complete misread, but some folks have said that they don't want to do anything, and we just have to wait out the next 2 years till we get a new president, and then we can work on this. And I don't agree with that approach at all because you know, if you think about 2 years of doing nothing and then you get a new president, Republican or Democrat, and they get kind of settled in the job, it'll be 4 years before we have any meaningful trade agreements. So I don't think that's the right approach, but we just need the currency addressed.
And, you know, the problem is Senator Rob Portman, Ohio, Republican, worked with Senator Stabenow on a currency manipulation amendment in the Senate, and President Obama put out a veto threat. That tells you he's not going to deal with currency manipulation. We have a responsibility in the Congress to protect you, and we want you to be able, business needs to be able to ship overseas, but you need to have a level playing field.
Absolutely.
It seems as if you, obviously, the three of you are of like mind. What about your colleagues back in Washington? And why would the president be tone deaf with apparently everyone bringing this up?
You know, one thing I found being a freshman in Congress is that there's many agendas, many. Some you kind of understand, others you don't. But what my job and what our job is to protect the interests of our state and of our districts. And so the president has an agenda with this, and I'm very much a Democrat and very supportive of my president, but I am sent to Congress to stand there and address the issues, dive into it, and protect what's important back here at home.
But Paul W., the president's not moving on this issue for the simple reason that the administration believes that any currency manipulation protection would kill any potential trade agreement.
That's the line.
That's what we're hearing.
That's the company line.
Anyone, anything else on this before we move on to another topic? I don't know, Debbie, I think you probably have something more you could say. I mean,
do, but I'll
Congresswoman
spare it.
Dingell. Oh my gosh, you
Stick
got
with
me
Debbie.
finally to call me. Oh.
I
She always says, call me Debbie, and I never have, and I just, that was Freudian. Congresswoman Dingell, I know you have strong feelings about the Export-Import Bank reauthorization. Tell us your thoughts.
Well, I think it should be extended and renewed. The fact of the matter is we're talking about level playing fields in trade. We are competing with many governments overseas that subsidize their governments, from China to Russia to many of the Mideast countries. And I'd like to make a point very strongly. The Ex-Im Bank does not cost the federal government $1 single. And actually, in the last 17 years, has made, I think, $7 billion. But it is a way to support small businesses and to stabilize them in terms of exporting to other countries. And so for all those that want to help support these American products going overseas, it is a very important tool in the toolbox.
I had the opportunity to meet the current president of the bank and actually visit some of the small businesses that have benefited from that. The fact that this is such a volatile discussion right now, and this is something that is working, and we have something that's working, that's benefiting the small businesses. Let's keep it there and let's support it, and so that we can continue to grow this trade issue and import exports. It is so critical for us to be competitive. And I really don't understand I won't say I don't understand, I don't support the discussion and the issue of attacking something that's working in America. Let's keep it there. Let's use our balls and fight that one too.
It's an epidemic.
Well, just, I'm not going there, so
Yeah, well, I'm just impressed you didn't cross your legs just now.
I might move down.
I'm fighting the urge.
So Ex-Im's going to elapse if it's not reauthorized by June 30th. There's a lot of conflicting information on it. Jeb Henserling, the chair of financial services, will tell you that, in fact, if you use fair accounting methods, it doesn't make money. He'll tell you that it's corporate welfare. It doesn't create jobs. He'll tell you we don't need a level playing field because it accounts for less than 1% of our GMP. The one thing I do believe about Ex-Im is it does need to be less political, and it does need to stick to its original mission, which was to be the bank of last resort. And in my opinion, if you can get a surety or a guarantee from the private sector, albeit it may be more expensive, that's the proper role. We don't need the government filling that role. And if you can't get a guarantee or a surety for something because you're trying to borrow on a foreign company's balance sheet and no one will lend on that, then maybe that is the right place for a small business to have the Ex-Im Bank fill. But today, I do have concern. And the other thing about Ex-Im is they're their own worst enemy. Several years ago, there were 75 recommendations that Congress made, and they didn't implement any of them. They ignored them. They haven't been transparent with Congress. So they've created some of this problem themselves. They've done a good job. I've been contacted by at least a half a dozen businesses in my district that say that Ex-Im is critical to their continued success. And I appreciate that, but we do need to have them stick to their mission, which is a bank of last resort. If you can go get a surety from Lloyd's of London, or you can get a line of credit from Bank of America, it may be a little more expensive. That may be a better solution than having Ex-Im be everything to everyone, because that was not the original intent.
International trade is incredibly important to Michigan and to America. It's a critical economic engine for Michigan jobs, American jobs, prosperity, and strength. But here's the reality. When one of our companies, maybe is like a small company, may not be competing with a foreign company, they're actually competing with a foreign government.
Yes.
Because the foreign governments are underwriting the foreign companies.
Yes.
And that makes it an unfair fight. That doesn't work.
Correct.
What do we do?
That's exactly
Well, I
what's
mean,
happening.
actually, the entire delegation, another example, delegation working together. Delta has raised the issue with a number of other airlines about fair sky. I think we call it fair skies. Fair skies. And the fact of the matter is, you've got a couple of governments in the Mideast that are underwriting the airlines over there and reducing the costs for consumers. And Delta and American Airlines, and I forget the third, have raised the issue. It's an unfair trade advantage, and they have filed a complaint with the federal government. Every member of the Michigan delegation, I think Justin Amash may not have, but has signed that letter in a very bipartisan way. We need to protect our businesses. We are here to protect you. That's our job, not to get in the way, not to be bureaucratic. I actually agree on every point David raised about the bank. We do need to look at what those issues are, but we need to protect our businesses. You create jobs. We need to have a stronger partnership with business, Democrats and Republicans, and we need to look at these issues.
Some pretty serious issues brought up, noting that 1982 to 1995, the Export-Import Bank operated at a loss every year. In 1987, the XM's chairman was granted a $3 billion bailout from taxpayers by the U.S. Treasury after many years of running significant losses. The bank's portfolio was essentially a third of the size it is today, and additionally, from 1992 to 96, the bank received multiple bailouts totaling nearly $10 billion. And over and above that, there has been some corruption, some bribery, and are these not factual?
My facts all say that it's not costing the government anything. So, but we'll look at it. I mean, but there are Michigan businesses that it is helping greatly.
But to your point, there are half a dozen people that I think have been indicted or are under investigation at XM. The default rate in the last 9 years has not been a problem. The default rate is like 0.2%, so it's a de minimis problem in the grand scheme of things. Whether it makes money or not depends on the accounting method you use, but in the past, you're correct, there has been problems and they're continuing.
And they tried to clean it up, and David was right that there was a report that there were a number of things that they needed to look at. I'm going to go back and read that, and
Paul,
they need to look
we're
at
at
that.
a situation where do you throw out the baby with the bathwater? We have this support system for our small businesses that are working. Are there things we need to correct? I sit on oversight on the government committee, and I look at all the problems that are happening in our functioning government. There are some things we need to fix, but in this case, it's clear you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's address those issues. This is something that gives us opportunity to be competitive in import-export, so let's fix those things that we're talking about, and we don't want to talk about the economy and things that are happening. There's so many things that play into alleged bailouts that has been essential to the survival of our country. So that should not be a red flag to say that this is not a functional resource that we have in our country.
It's a tool in the toolbox.
Yes.
Anything else, David?
I think
Your eyes got wider. I just wondered if you wanted to say something.
no, I agree with everything Brenda said. I think it serves a role. We just have to relook at making sure they stick to their mission and
David's right.
and it's more transparent and more accountable to Congress, because that has not been the case.
We move from the Highway Trust Fund, the Trade Priorities Act, the Export-Import Bank reauthorization, and now finally the age-old conversation about immigration and what you can or cannot do, or what you think will happen, and how we're going to somehow come together on this. Debbie, you first. I mean, Congresswoman Dingell, you first.
Let's stick to Debbie. I'm Debbie. Congressman is my husband, that I love very much. Okay. I think comprehensive immigration reform is absolutely needed in this country, but that's a different question than when will it happen. And we have unable as a Congress to come together on it. The fact of the matter is, I've never seen a broader coalition of people want and ask for comprehensive immigration reform, from labor to businesses, from farmers who cannot get the people that they need to pick their crops, to businesses that are not able to get the people that they need in some of their businesses. We've got a lot of very complicated issues. We've got to deal with children that have been born here. What do you do with their parents? What's fair? What's not fair? This has always been a land of opportunity. We've got to deal with tough issues. We've got to make tough decisions, and there are going to be some really tough ones, but not dealing with it doesn't make it go away.
Congresswoman Lawrence.
I have the good fortune of having probably one of the most diverse districts, not only in Michigan, but one of the most diverse in the country. I have had the majority of my casework be related to immigration issues. It is an issue in America. It's a family issue, and it is incumbent upon us to get comprehensive immigration reform. So we talk about the family issue. A lot of times I've talked to corporations, and we talk about the visas that we bring individuals over to fill jobs that are needed. It is a time for us to really have the serious debate like transportation, infrastructure. But what has happened, this is my most frustrating thing.
And try to
being
wrap
in
up with
Congress.
this so that we can be finished.
My
on
most
time.
frustrating thing with Congress is that we can't have that conversation without the poison pills being put in to stop us from having that real conversation, and I'm fighting to have it.
Final word, Congressman Trott.
So I think immigration is probably the most partisan issue in Washington today, and it's going to remain that way for the next couple of years, I believe. And I don't want to sound partisan, but I think the president has created some of these problems with his executive orders and his unwillingness to work with Congress on immigration. He's taken a very extreme position and not worked with Congress. And I think the first thing we have to do to get the debate going in the right direction is to pass Chairman McCall's bill, which calls for a $50 billion investment to secure our borders. You know, in 1986, Ronald Reagan gave 3 million immigrants amnesty and never secured the borders. And we need to do that so we can start with a baseline that we can start to work on immigration issues. And
I wish we
solve them.
had more time. I know
I just
Congresswoman
want to
Lawrence
say,
is-
I applaud the president for doing something, because we were doing nothing. So I applaud him. Let's get to work.
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with our newest congressional delegation. Thank you very much.